Welcome to Myth Madness. This episode will cover another of the Iranian hero Rostam's adventures from the Shahnameh, an epic poem composed in Persian around 1010 AD. The pod has already covered a handful of Rostam's feats, and this one will tell about his relationship with his son Sohrab. As I've mentioned before, the Shahnameh is a critical piece of Persian literature. The story of Sohrab, found within, when in the original language, is considered one of the best examples of Persian poetry. Over the centuries, it was a very popular story, but it ultimately is a very tragic tale. It also marks a turning point. In previous entries, the Shahnameh's coverage of Rostam is very positive. He rides to the defense of Iranian kings. He slays supernatural creatures. He is essentially a knight in shining armor. But with the story of Sohrab, we begin to see his flaws, his actions that come from them, and his despair that results. So, according to the Shahnameh, one day Rostam was plagued with sadness. No reason for it is given. Maybe he was just having a bad day. To clear his mind and turn his mood, he saddled his horse, left his castle in Sistan, and went hunting. Rostam traveled towards the border with the kingdom of Turan. After killing a wild donkey, roasting and eating it, he fell asleep in the grass. His horse Raksh wandered away and was eventually found by a group of Turanian horsemen. They caught Raksh and carried him away to their own home city. When Rostam woke up and found his horse was missing, he was very distressed. Rostam wondered how he would face the shame of losing his own horse while asleep. So much for being a great warrior. He made his way on foot to the closest town, Samangan. The king of Samangan learned of Rostam's approach and welcomed him into the city. He asked him what he needed, and told him the people of the kingdom would serve him in any way they could. Rostam told the king that his horse had wandered away. He had followed the tracks as far as the city, and that was where they disappeared. Rostam said he would be grateful if he had help finding the horse. The king told him that nobody would have stolen his horse on purpose, and there must have been some mistake. The king suggested the two of them would spend that evening drinking and feasting. He was sure that Rostam's horse would not stay lost for long. So Rostam spent the evening at the king's palace. The king brought wine and dark-eyed, rosy-cheeked girls to dance to the music. After Rostam had drunk enough and was feeling tired, he went to the chamber the servants had prepared for him. That night, as Rostam lay sleeping, the door slowly opened, and a woman carrying a scented candle entered the room and approached the bed. She had beautiful curved eyebrows and thick dark ringlets for hair. Rostam awoke and asked her name. She replied she was Tamina, the daughter of the king. She had heard of Rostam's heroic battles, his glory, how he faced dragons, demons, and prowled the borders of Turan, looking for Persia's enemies. When she heard these stories, she bit her lip and fell in love with the hero. She wanted to see his chest and his face, and was overcome with desire to fill her womb with his son. Tamina offered Rostam a deal. If he agreed to sleep with her, she would give him his horse. Rostam, ever a man of appetites, of course agreed to this proposal. Tamina was quite lovely, and he figured only good could come of it. The two of them passed the night together. In the morning, Rostam gave the princess a clasp he often wore on his upper arm. He told her if she gave birth to a daughter, she was to braid the daughter's hair with it as a sign of good luck. If she gave birth to a son, he was to wear the clasp on his upper arm as a sign of who his father was. Later, the king of Samangan told Rostam his horse had been found. Rostam happily rubbed Raksh all over, saddled him, and rode on home. 9 months passed, and the princess gave birth to a son who looked just like Rostam. Tamina named him Sohrab, which means bright-faced. The baby grew quickly. After a month, he was the size of a typical 1-year-old. At 3 years old, he could play polo. At 5, he learned archery and how to throw a javelin. At 10 years old, no one dared to fight him, and he asked his mother why he was so much taller and stronger than the other boys his age. He asked who his father was, and why had all of this been kept hidden from him. Sohrab actually threatened his mother, and said if she didn't tell him what he wanted to know, he would kill her. But Tamina had raised this precocious child, and was not easily frightened. She told him to control his temper, and then divulged he was the son of the Iranian hero, Rostam. She showed Sohrab a letter she had received from Rostam, along with the rubies sent as a gift. Tamina also warned her son that Afrasiab, the king of Turan, who was the overlord of his grandfather the king of Samangan, must never learn of any of this. Rostam was Afrasiab's greatest rival, and Afrasiab would see Sohrab as a dangerous threat if he ever found out. What's more, Tamina silently worried that if Rostam learned of Sohrab's strength, he would summon his son to fight at his side. Sohrab could die in combat, and that would break Tamina's heart. Sohrab told his mother that this was something that should not have been kept secret. He told her he would gather an army of Iranian warriors and drive Kay-Khos from the Persian throne. Then, once all of the members of the Persian royal family were eliminated, Sohrab would give the crown to his father Rostam. The two of them could combine their armies, fight against Afrasiab, and see his throat slit too. Tamina was disturbed and was deeply worried to hear her son's misguided, ludicrous plan. But her words would not stop the youth from gathering himself an army. Eventually, Afrasiab learned the boy, one of his subjects, was threatening war against Iran. Sohrab was arrogant, overly confident, and didn't take advice from anybody, and that suited Afrasiab just fine. Afrasiab had in fact already discovered that Sohrab was actually Rostam's son. The king of Turan hoped the secret would remain hidden, and Rostam and Sohrab would end up facing each other on the battlefield. Rostam was old. If he faced his younger son in combat, he would surely get killed by the young lion Sohrab. And then, when he was still exhausted from the fight, Afrasiab's own assassins could slit Sohrab's throat while he slept. It would be a masterstroke, and with Rostam finally out of the way and Sohrab dead, Iran would be undefended and ripe for picking. On the border of Iran, there was a castle named the White Fortress. It was commanded by a man named Hajir, who was well trusted by Kay-Khos. Sohrab took his army to this fortress, and when Hajir saw the young warrior's banners on the horizon, he rode out to confront him. Sohrab mocked the man and wondered if Hajir was coming out to fight off the army alone. Hajir told him he had come out to cut off his head and send it to Kay-Khos. The two started to duel. They fought ferociously with lances, and eventually Hajir was struck to the ground. Sohrab went to cut off his head, but Hajir begged for mercy. Sohrab spared him, had the man bound, and then sent him away. When the inhabitants of the castle watched their commander be taken away, many of them cried. But one of the women, Gordafarid, thought such behavior was shameful. She dressed herself in armor, her long hair hidden beneath her helmet, and rode out of the fortress. She was eager to fight and defend her homeland. She challenged Sohrab to a duel. He laughed, figuring another pathetic victim had stepped into his trap. He agreed. Gordafarid aimed her bow. She shot him with arrows weaving back and forth on her horse. She raised a lance and hurled it at her opponent. Sohrab dodged all her moves and struck her in the waist with his own lance, knocking her from her horse. But Gordafarid was not defeated. She simply unsheathed her sword and again hacked at him. Sohrab snatched her helmet from her head. Her hair streamed out, revealing she was a woman. Sohrab was amazed. He decided to spare her life. He took her prisoner, tying her up in his lasso. Gordafarid realized that if she wanted to escape, she would have to trick her opponent. She told him many people were watching from the two armies surrounding them. If the observers saw from her face that he was fighting a mere girl and that she had done as well as she had, he would become a laughingstock. She told Sohrab that if he let her go, she would hand over the fortress and its wealth to him. Sohrab looked at her bright white teeth, red lips, and beautiful face. He relented. He told her that she should not go back on her promise, and if she tried, she would not be safe behind the fortress's walls. Gordafarid rode back to the gates and went inside. She walked up to the walls, looked over, and shouted down to Sohrab, "O king, turn back. No Iranian will take a Persian bride. News will spread of your army. Kay-Khos will send Rostam. Neither you nor any of your men will live for much longer. I'll be sad to see you destroyed. Turn now and flee." Sohrab felt like a complete idiot, realizing he had been tricked so easily. He burned down some of the surrounding towns and villages and promised he would raze the White Fortress to the ground. That night, Gordafarid's father, the new commander of the castle, sent a letter to Kay-Khos telling him what had happened. Kay-Khos received the message for help and was troubled. He discussed it with the leading heroes of his kingdom, Tus, Gudars son of Keshfad, Giv son of Gudars, Gorgon, Bahram, Farhad. They all agreed that Giv should go to Sistan and tell Rostam about the dangerous new warrior fighting for Turan. Giv quickly galloped off. Before he left, Kay-Khos told him not to delay. After he delivered the message, he should return to the Persian capital at once. When Giv arrived, Rostam questioned him carefully about the latest conflict between Iran and Turan. When Rostam read Kay-Khos' letter, he sat back in astonishment. "It seems we have a second Sam in the world," he said, "and from Turan no less. I actually have a son in Turan, but he is still a small boy who has not yet learned that battle leads to glory." Rostam told Giv they should rest for a day, and then they would go to the king and lead the Persian army to war. Rostam was confident that when the mysterious warrior saw his banner, he would quickly turn around and retreat back to Turan. So Rostam and Giv sat down to drink wine, and forgot Kay-Khos' instructions to hurry. In the morning, Rostam was hungover, and he decided they should spend that day drinking too. This happened again the next day. After spending 4 full days in Sistan, Giv finally remembered Kay-Khos' instructions and knew the king would be very angry at their slowness. But Rostam told him not to worry, arrogantly saying that there was no man alive, even the king, who would bother Rostam. Nevertheless, they both saddled their horses that same day and set out. Sure enough, when Giv and Rostam arrived at Kay-Khos' court, the king was furious that Rostam had ignored his summons. He ordered that Rostam be strung up on the gallows and executed. His name was never to be mentioned again. Giv was horrified. Rostam was Iran's greatest warrior. Giv objected to the king's demand. This only made the king more angry. Kay-Khos ordered Tus to take both of them away and execute Giv too. Rostam was not going to take this quietly. As Tus moved to lead him out of the room, Rostam yelled back at the king, "You are not fit to rule. Who is Kay-Khos, or Tus, to threaten me? Rosh is my throne, and my helmet is my crown. When that Turanian attacks, no child or warrior will be left alive. Who will you turn to then? You won't see me here again." And he left the palace to ride back to Sistan. The other warriors were alarmed at the argument between Rostam and Khos. If it split them apart, Persia was doomed. The nobles turned to Gudars. They told him the king would only listen to him. They asked him to go speak to the king and soothe the troubles. Gudars went to Kay-Khos and patiently reminded him of the threat Sohrab's army posed to Iran, and how Rostam had saved the day many times before. Kay-Khos had calmed down by now, and he recognized the wisdom of Gudars' words. He told Gudars to ride after Rostam and remind him of their friendship. Gudars and the other warriors rushed after Rostam. They told him they all knew the king was a complete fool with an impulsive temper. They told him the king was sorry. But Rostam was not soothed. He said Kay-Khos was no more than a fistful of dust, and he would not return to help him. This was not good. If Rostam did not agree to lead the army, Sohrab would make quick work of the other Persian warriors. Fortunately, Gudars was clever. He knew how to persuade Rostam. He told Rostam that if the great warrior did not return with them, the soldiers in the army would begin to wonder. Rumors would spread that perhaps Rostam was afraid of Sohrab, and left not because of the fight with Kay-Khos, but because he feared the Turanian warrior's strength. Hearing Gudars' words, Rostam was shamed. He rode back with the other heroes to Kay-Khos' court. The king officially apologized. A feast was held, and Rostam agreed to lead Iran's defense. The following morning, the Persian army began their march to the White Fortress. By then, its Persian defenders had quietly melted away, leaving the empty fortress to be captured by Sohrab. When Sohrab stood on the battlements and saw the Persian army arrive, he grew excited. He swore to turn the surrounding plain into a sea of blood in Afrasiab's name. Meanwhile, as the sun set on the Persians making camp, Rostam decided to hide his presence and to spy on the enemy commander. He disguised himself as an enemy soldier, and quickly sneaked his way into the White Fortress. He found Sohrab sitting in a large throne surrounded by the famed Turanian warriors Zende Razam, Human, and Barman, as well as countless other well-armed youths. Zende Razam eventually saw the disguised Rostam among the soldiers, and not recognizing him, he approached the tall warrior. He asked him who he was, and wanted to see his face. Rostam knew he was about to be recognized. He darted forward, struck Zende Razam on the neck, and killed him. Later, Sohrab noticed Zende Razam was missing and sent some men to look for him. They reported back when they found his dead body. Sohrab was astonished. A wolf had entered their flock. Sohrab swore to exact vengeance for Zende Razam when he rode out to battle the following morning. Meanwhile, Rostam sneaked his way back to the Persian camp. He told Giv and Kay-Kaus that he had killed one of the enemy warriors and also saw Sohrab in the flesh. He told them the enemy captain had no equal and looked exactly like Rostam's grandfather, Sam. In the morning, Sohrab again walked to the battlements to observe the Persian army below. He brought the captive Hajir with him and told the man to point out the Persian leaders below. When Sohrab pointed to multicolored tents of leopard skin with a banner of a sun and a golden moon, he was told that those belonged to Kay-Kaus. A banner showing an elephant belonged to Tus, son of Nozar. A banner showing a lion and a huge jewel belonged to Gudars, son of Keshvad. A banner showing a wolf belonged to Giv, the eldest son of Gudars. Nearby was a man sitting on a throne surrounded by slaves. That was Kay-Kaus' son, Prince Faribor's. Hearing these names, Sohrab was disappointed. He pointed out a few other warriors, but Hajir did not know their names. Rostam did not seem to be anywhere. Sohrab threatened Hajir. He yelled that Rostam must be below. He was the greatest warrior in the Persian army, after all. He told Hajir that if he pointed out Rostam, he would be rewarded with wealth, but if he hid his whereabouts, Sohrab would cut off his head. Hajir was unaffected. He thought to himself that if he pointed out Rostam, Sohrab would issue a challenge to the great hero, and very well might overcome him in single combat. And if Rostam was killed, who would be able to save Iran? Nope, better to stay quiet and risk death than aid the enemy in his invasion. So instead, Hajir asked Sohrab why he was so obsessed with Rostam. He wouldn't be able to kill him, and he wouldn't be able to catch him either. Sohrab was angered. He slapped Hajir across the face so hard that the man fell to the ground. Sohrab turned on his heels and went back to his quarters. He dressed in armor, mounted his horse, and rode out onto the battlefield. Sohrab rode along the army lines, bellowing out a challenge to Kay-Kaus and the Persians, asking if there was even one of them that would face him alone in battle. Persian ranks remained quiet. They murmured to each other, whispering that this man was like a second Rostam. No one came forward. In response, Sohrab began knocking down their tents, with the warriors running to get out of the way. Kay-Kaus told Tus to go and find Rostam and bring him to fight Sohrab. When Tus finally found Rostam, the great warrior sighed. Past kings had always rewarded Rostam for his exploits with gifts, but Kay-Kaus took him for granted, ordering him to overcome the latest hardship but never giving anything in return. Nevertheless, Rostam wasn't going to shy away from a challenge. He saddled his horse and rode forward. Sohrab insulted Rostam by calling him an old man, and Rostam replied that even though he was old, he had fought in many wars, killed many demons, and overcome many adversaries from Tehran. It was at this point that Sohrab asked his opponent if he was Rostam. But Rostam replied that he was not, and he was not related to the hero's family in any way. This lie would have terrible consequences. So, the two of them began to fight, neither knowing the true identity of the other. Sparks flew from the clashing iron of their swords. Their blades broke, and they moved on to maces. Eventually, the fighting paused. Both warriors were exhausted and drenched in sweat. Rostam marveled at the strength of his opponent. No one he had ever fought with before had brought him to this point of exhaustion. The hero was annoyed. His enemy was a young, unknown warrior who had showed him up in front of the entire Persian army. They started fighting again, trying to grab each other's belts and pull each other from their horses. They tried shooting arrows, but no matter what each of them did, their efforts to harm the other were useless. Finally, Sohrab struck Rostam on the shoulder with his mace, and he thought his soul almost left his body. He could not go on much longer. Yet luckily for Rostam, evening came. The two fighters declared a draw, agreed to fight again the following morning, and returned to their camps. That night, Rostam questioned Give and Kaykaus on how Sohrab had fought. Rostam explained to the king how he had tried to throw Sohrab to the ground, a strategy that had worked on many opponents in the past, but a wind could shake a mountainside before it would shift that hero. Rostam was downcast and said he needed to find a way to overcome Sohrab. He was no longer confident that victory would come his way. When Rostam returned to his own tents, he told his brother Zavareh about his worries. He also instructed Zavareh on how to lead their forces tomorrow. If Rostam was killed in the duel with Sohrab, Zavareh was not to charge forward offering to fight next. Instead, he was to take their warriors, leave the army, and return to Sistan to comfort their father Zal and their mother Rudabeh. When the shining sun rose the following morning, Rostam dressed in his tiger skin armor and mounted Raksh. He put his iron helmet on his head, made sure his lasso was attached to his saddle, and hefted his sword and set out. While Rostam had spent the night in worry, Sohrab had listened to musicians and drank wine with his companions. He told Human he believed his opponent was actually Rostam. The Persian warrior seemed to fit his mother's descriptions. So when Sohrab met Rostam again on the battlefield, he greeted him with a smile. Sohrab asked if he still wanted to fight, or if they should throw down their weapons and drink together. They could swear oaths, be allies, and hold a feast. He told the Persian he knew he was a nobleman, and asked for him to share his lineage. But Rostam would have none of it. He brushed Sohrab's overtures of friendship aside. The night before they had agreed to fight. Morning had come, and it was up to the Creator, who lived and who died. They dismounted, approached each other, and began to wrestle. Sohrab struck Rostam to the ground and sat on his chest. Sohrab drew a dagger and moved to cut off Rostam's head. But before his throat was slit, Rostam whispered to Sohrab that according to Iranian custom, when a hero bested his opponent, he had to show him mercy first. Then, if they resumed fighting, and he got the better of his opponent again, he could kill him. This was nonsense, a simple trick to take advantage of Sohrab's youth and inexperience. But it worked. Sohrab believed the older warrior, and released him. They agreed to fight again later. It did not take Sohrab long to find out he had been tricked. When he returned to the Turanian army's camp and told his companion Human what had happened, Human revealed that there was no such custom. Sohrab should have killed the Iranian when he had the chance. Now furious, Sohrab once again saddled his horse and went to find Rostam. Meanwhile, after Rostam was set free by Sohrab, he stumbled to a nearby river. There he drank until his stomach was full and washed the sweat, dirt, and blood from his body. He prayed to the Creator for victory, and then returned to the battlefield, only to find Sohrab already there and ready to fight. The two warriors fought again. Sohrab kept pressing Rostam, but was unable to push his advantages like before, as though fate had turned against him. Rostam forced him to the ground, and knowing the young warrior would not stay down for long, he plunged his dagger into Sohrab's chest. Sohrab gasped for breath. Blood began to pool in his mouth. He told his opponent that his father would avenge him, and pulled the clip from his shoulder and handed it over. Sohrab said to take it to Rostam, his father, and tell him the young warrior had looked for him, but with his search incomplete, had died. Rostam was deeply disturbed to learn that Sohrab was actually his own son, born to Tamina years before. Consumed with the knowledge that he had committed the great evil of killing his son, Rostam lay by Sohrab's dying body the whole day. Rostam told the other Persians to end the war. The death of Sohrab would be enough. He even took out a dagger and moved to cut his own throat, but Tus, Gudars, and Gostaham quickly stopped him. In desperation, Rostam asked them to go to Kay-Khos and tell the king what happened. He begged that the king send him the special potion that heals all wounds. Rostam claimed a healed Sohrab would surely serve Kay-Khos alongside Rostam. But when Kay-Khos heard Rostam's request, he paused. Kay-Khos was suspicious of Sohrab. Rostam was already Persia's strongest warrior, and sometimes he was troublesome for the king. Sohrab was just as strong, and had grown up fighting Persia. What was to stop him, once healed, from killing the king? And if he didn't, what was to stop Rostam from deposing Kay-Khos with Sohrab at his side? So Kay-Khos delayed, and never sent the elixir. Sohrab succumbed to his wounds and died. Upon the final death of his son, Rostam burned his tents to the ground, and his soldiers smeared ash on their foreheads in mourning. Kay-Khos gave Rostam and Zavareh permission to lead their troops back to Sistan. Peace was made with Human and the other warriors from Turan, and they melted back across the border. Rostam took Sohrab's body back to Sistan. He showed the corpse to his father Zal, who was amazed how the young man had resembled his own father Sam. Rostam built a golden tomb for Sohrab and lay him inside, as a final gesture to honor his son. And just to underscore the tragedy a little more, at the same time, back in Samangan, Sohrab's mother, Tamina, heard of her son's death. In her grief, she gave away all of their possessions, burned the family house to the ground, and called out, "Whom shall I clasp upon my bosom now? Who is there that will rid me of my grief? Woe for his soul and body, eye and luster, that now dwell in dust instead of hall and garden." Over the next year, her own life wasted away, and her soul soon followed her son's into the afterlife. And that's the tragic tale of Rostam and Sohrab. It should not be lost on listeners that the deaths result from Rostam's stubbornness, and had he actually paid attention to the clues that had appeared, and had identified himself to Sohrab, perhaps his son, and also Tamina, would not have died. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone who would enjoy it too. As always, thank you for listening.